Corey, how you doing today? You finished your banana and you were ready to roll. Get that energy
Yeah,
boost.
I'm a little bit under the weather today, Mark, but not really. I needed a little bit of potassium to get me going this next hour.
Thank you for being here.
It seems like every time I kind of have a day where I'm not feeling the best is when all this news floods forth. So I'm just kind of taking it one step at a time. Of course, the news about Deacon Hill, news about Cale Vanderbush. We have the spring practice we've recapped it. I know you posted some content to this channel after I called into your main show Saturday. And of course, I did a 2-hour show with Don Patterson. Lots to get to. I mean, this is a busy time. You got about a week left of this portal window being open. So players got to get their names in now unless they're graduates. And let me make sure I'm very clear on that. Unless they're graduates, because Iowa doesn't have to be below 86 scholarships by the end of the portal window being open. They got to be down to 85 by the time we hit fall. So is it possible they could get to 86 or 87 and then need to, lose one more guy? That's possible. And it's always possible that some graduate leaves. And I mean, there's a couple of guys that come to mind that came back that I think a lot of Iowa fans look at and say, I wish this guy wasn't taking up a scholarship, but he has experience. Kirk obviously feels really strongly about a guy who has experience and longevity and who's paid their dues. So we'll see. We're down to 87 now. 87 people on scholarship with Vanderbush and Hill in the portal, and got to get down to 85.
You heard it from Corey. I'm sure we will touch upon what Corey took in on Saturday. However, we've got a video posted here for the exhaustive deep dive. Head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm, Corey and Coach Don Patterson with the spring practice recap. All right, let's get to it. Deacon Hill, and let's separate the personal from the player. Do not wish any harm or anything negative on Deacon Hill. Hope he is successful going forward, develops his skills, and is able to find a competitive place to go play football and reaches his goals. However, I would believe that most people that are watching and listening right now and will be in the next couple of days are fairly satisfied that Deacon Hill is moving on. Now, the question will be, what does Iowa do in response, and what are the options and opportunities there?
What are the options or opportunities there, Mark?
Okay.
I mean, I got a couple of names that come to mind. I know you feel very strongly about the idea that Iowa should have went to the portal at quarterback back in the winter. And I was not in agreement with you on that. But it wasn't because I thought Deacon Hill was the answer. I can tell you that. And in hindsight, yeah, it'd be nice to have another guy in there. Now, maybe it pays off because having less guys got more snaps to a guy like Marco Lainez, who has really good upside and athleticism. But they also need somebody this fall camp. And Cade McNamara-Kirk said yesterday that he believes Cade is going to be ready for June. But he didn't look very good Saturday. Looked very ginger when moving side to side, and a little bit of action we saw from him. He was not involved in 11-on-11s. So, yeah, I mean, lots of stuff to uncover. I think the intriguing prospect for me, a couple of them. One is Brendan Sullivan from Northwestern. That one surprised me. Tim Lester offered him when Lester was the head coach at Western Michigan. So there's a connection there. He entered the portal right after Deacon Hill did. Not saying there's any direct correlation there. And he's a starting Big Ten. I mean, I think he was probably going to be the starter there this year. So I'd be surprised if he would come to Iowa, with some idea that he's likely going to be the backup behind Cade McNamara. Why would he do that? I don't know. He's a graduate, so I think he's got 1 year left, right? So I don't know. Your take, Mark?
Okay. So yes, it was my strong recommendation to pursue a quarterback in the portal back in December. And we would be here for the next 90 minutes listing and also evaluating the quarterbacks who have been selected by other teams since the end of last season. And I know that some of those quarterbacks may be out of Iowa's reach, but this is a top 15 to 25 program in the country. So they should be able to go get a capable quarterback. They have not had one start since Nathan Stanley walked off campus. So there were a ton of options out there. They stayed with what they have. And if Cade McNamara plays the great majority of the season against all the key opponents and is the quarterback that we saw for a season and a half at Michigan, all is well. They will be receiving capable quarterback play. But again, he's a bit brittle, or has proven to be in the last 2 years. And a guy like Brendan Sullivan, like you, I just looked at his numbers a few minutes ago. He's thrown, and I did, like you, anticipate him being the starter at Northwestern. He has played quite a bit the last 2 seasons. Ben Bryant, the transfer in from Cincinnati, was a little bit better of a player and was the main starter, but he got banged up from time to time. Brendan Sullivan has thrown 200 passes in the Big Ten, so he has experience, and he is completing, Iowa fans, could you get used to this? 69% of his passes over the course of 200 thrown. So he's not bad. He may be able to compete with Cade McNamara if the coaches are able to, and considering their job roles, I would hope that they would be able to take off all bias considering what Cade McNamara has accomplished and just say, let these quarterbacks play in August and let's evaluate them. And if that's the situation, they bring in Brendan Sullivan. I don't necessarily know that he's the answer, but I think he's a capable competitor for the number 1 job.
Who's the other quarterback competing with Sullivan at Northwestern, or who has been the other quarterback at Northwestern?
Well, they had Ben Bryant, who was a transfer in from Cincinnati a couple years ago, and he has basically been the starting quarterback the last 2 years.
So he's got another year? Bryant does?
No, he's gone. He's gone.
Okay, so who competed with Sullivan this spring is what I
got to tell you, it's going to be a name that it is not going to surprise me, because I rated the Big Ten quarterbacks and I delivered my rankings, and albeit I did have Sullivan maybe at the bottom, maybe last, second to last, but he's a pretty capable player. I know that doesn't sound hopeful. I know Iowa fans, you don't want to be acquiring the worst starting quarterback in the Big Ten, but he's in a group of players and certainly could develop and be better. But I got to tell you, I don't recall who else that would be. I thought he was going to be the starting quarterback.
Well, that's what I bring up, because I guess the one conceivable way I could hypothesize that, hey, maybe or speculate that maybe Sullivan entered with an eye to Iowa, and that's a long shot. But I guess if there was a younger guy who was pushing him and he felt like it was 50-50 heading into the summer, he may feel like he's got as good of a chance at Iowa. Maybe he feels like he's got a 50-50 chance at Iowa, so why compete at Northwestern when he's got a better team and perhaps a coach that he has more faith in? And remember, Northwestern had a coaching change as well since he got there. So maybe it's possible. I mean, it's possible. I don't know why Iowa wouldn't pursue him, especially with the Lester connection. Quarterbacks have not been there's not been a ton of quarterbacks in the portal this post-spring period. So where would Deacon Hill rank on portal quarterbacks that are available right now, Mark?
Well, we're going to find out where all these major services rank him.
I guess he's top 10. My guess is that he's top 10, because I don't think there are that many out there.
Oh, yeah. He's in the top, 5 or 6 right now.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But that's the reality of it. Now, there's a kid from UCLA that is somewhat intriguing.
Colin Schlee.
I think he's a guy to look at, to watch for. After that, I mean, I really don't know. I haven't. I mean, Jaden Rashad is not coming to Iowa. I saw somebody in the chat earlier bring that up. Wouldn't that be something? But that's not happening.
He's visiting Georgia this weekend.
Oh, well, there you go. And by the way, Colin Schlee is visiting Virginia Tech this weekend. So, I mean, he's got other Power 5 interest.
He would be the backup there. They have an entrenched starter at Virginia Tech.
He was the
not
backup.
going to be the starter there.
He was the backup at UCLA.
He got his opportunities, maybe because of injury. I don't recall, but he played there too. He
Yeah,
played about as much as Sullivan played.
I don't know that I'd be doing cartwheels for either guy, but I mean, they need a body. And I know some people are just going to say, Corey, you're looking through the same demented glasses still. I'm not giving up on Marco Linez pushing Cade McNamara in the end.
You love that guy.
I listen, I'm not saying I'm not saying he's the guy. I'm just simply saying, I've said it a million times. He's as electric on the ground as we've seen from an Iowa quarterback since Brad Banks. You do not have to have the biggest arm to be a successful quarterback at this level.
Now, this is funny because a couple of people in the chat are saying former South Carolina quarterback Ryan Helinski is at Northwestern. Okay, that is the first name that came to mind. Ryan Helinski. I've known about Ryan Helinski. I was watching Ryan Helinski in 2018. That's how long he's been in college football. He was a part-time, kind of fill in if somebody's injured, but kind of wrestled the job away. He's had a very similar path as like a Brendan Sullivan at South Carolina. He was again battling for the starting job at Northwestern for the last few seasons. I kind of assumed he was gone because he's been playing forever, but I guess he's still there. So maybe Ryan Helinski played well in the spring, and Brendan Sullivan saw the writing on the wall.
Jackson in the chat says he wonders if Auburn can get Deacon Hill. That's what Jackson said. Is Jackson joking? Usually Jackson's not joking when he's in the chat.
Usually he's not. He's a hardcore football guy. They've got Peyton Thorne. Unless he got hurt that I missed something.
It'll be interesting to see who comes calling for Deacon Hill. Remember, Deacon Hill was committed to Fordham before he flipped to Iowa a year ago. So I'm just saying, like, that's the reality of it.
This program is so well run in about 80% of the areas.
Right.
Why are they signing quarterbacks from Fordham?
I'll just say this again, that Tim Lester is not Brian Ferentz or Ken O'Keefe or Greg Davis. He is Tim Lester. So
yeah, that's no reflection on him.
Yeah, I hope that we've turned the corner with that, right? I saw somebody on social media talking about it today, and it's something that I've expressed a number of times. Go back and look at the quarterbacks, Mark, that have left Iowa in the last 5-6 years. I mean, we're talking Spencer Petras, who ended up transferring to Utah State. Alex Padilla, who went to SMU and proceeded to be buried on the Mustangs depth chart. Joe Labus, who's now at Central Michigan. Deuce Hogan, who transferred to Kentucky, never could earn a scholarship. He's now at New Mexico State. And then Carson May, who transferred to, I think, like Coffeyville and then to Wyoming, and now he's back in the portal again without a home. So, like, yeah, I saw somebody on social media point that out and say, well, this is clearly not an issue with development. It's an issue with recruiting. I don't know that you can't just make bland black and white statements like that, because it could be both, right? Like, a couple of these guys had 4 stars in front of their names in the rankings. Now, those rankings aren't an exact science, but guys like May and, Alex Padilla had an offer at one time from Georgia. I know we bring that up. Deuce Hogan was a decently touted kid. So is it possible, not saying it's probable, but possible, that these are decent prospects when they get recruited, but they come to Iowa, and during those first 2 to 3 years, during a crucial period of development time in their careers, they are not developed well at Iowa. And so obviously they're going to be behind the 8 ball when they up and leave and go somewhere else. So maybe there's a degree of talent there wasted, but I would also have to think, Mark, that it's likely they also don't evaluate very well. And so I think it's a combination of both. You don't become as bad as they have been in pass offense and in quarterback play unless it's a combination of deficiencies.
I was under the impression at the time that Hogan and May were fairly highly thought of recruits and supposed to, out of all the names that you listed, those are the 2 that stand out.
Yeah.
As there being expectation.
Right. I mean, and remember, they were very close on Zach Wilson. They had a chance. They were this close with Zach Wilson. So it's like I don't believe it's just all evaluation or all development. It's a combination of things. Do you think Zach Wilson would be in the NFL right now? I know he's not had a great career so far, but he was drafted very high. Do you think he'd be in the NFL? I think it would have been a first round draft pick had he signed on with Iowa instead of BYU.
Probably not, just because of the opportunity in showing his skills
Well, maybe opportunity, but also partially
and
because of lack
development.
of development.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Petrus and Zach Wilson were considered kind of peers. Iowa took Petrus over Zach Wilson. So maybe that's on Iowa, but there's got to be a portion of this that we look at and say, hey, they got an issue developing these kids when they get to campus. And that's reflected too in statements in the past by people like Brian and Kirk when they've made comments like it takes a year, year and a half, or 2 years to learn this offense fully. That's one question I look forward to asking Tim Lester in the fall. How long should it take a hardworking young quarterback to pick up the offense to where he's at least palpable? And I'll be anxious to hear what he says on that because I'm guessing he's not going to say a year and a half.
And the connection you're making between evaluation and development makes total sense, because just think about, can you envision a scout who is able to spot great talent but has no idea what to do with it past that? Of course not. Or that you can develop you once you're handed the player that you are a master at developing them, but you can't spot it. No, those two things go hand in hand.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that any of the guys I just listed would be winning Heisman trophies in the SEC or somewhere or Ohio State. Iowa does not recruit on that level. Not claiming they do, but they do recruit on the same level as teams like BYU and Iowa State and other places where successful quarterbacks have been groomed in recent years. And so, yeah, where does Iowa turn now? They've got James Rezar, the freshman coming in from Florida, here in the next couple of months. I think chances of a true freshman starting with any Kirk Ferentz-led team is slim to none, and as Hayden Fry would say, slim left town. I don't think that's happening, but they got to keep working with Marco. I know we're big on this whole portal thing, but you can't put all your chips in on the portal. Like, they can go and try to get somebody, but it's also possible that they could swing and miss. It's possible Cade McNamara goes down with an injury because of his history, and the other guy could go down with the injury. They got to get everybody ready, and that's what Tim Lester's job is as a quarterback's coach, obviously, but it's something we have not seen with this program and this offense in recent years. Not everybody has not been ready. That's why you saw so many poor performances from people like Deacon Hill and Spencer Petras with nobody behind them to relieve them or help, because they had no developed depth at that quarterback position. And it's the same thing with wide receiver. You mentioned like 80% of the program, how well managed it is. You hit the nail on the head, because it's incredible. I don't think there's a program in the country. We've talked about the disparity between Iowa's defense year in and year out with Iowa's offense year in and year out. Is there another program in the country that has such a disparity with level of performance between with quarterback and receiver, and then every other position? Like, I mean, literally every other position. Now, offensive line hasn't been great, but think about how bad those two positions have performed. And we've seen the results, the fruits of that via the portal. All these receivers just hauling butt out of the portal from Iowa year after year. Same thing with quarterback. And I know quarterbacks enter from everywhere if they're not playing. But again, you would think if this was a capable offense and a capable passing attack, the quarterbacks would look at this and say, hey, nobody's done it. If I'm good enough, I can do it. There's something missing there. Obviously, hopefully Tim Lester can figure that out. He is figuring that out.
Yeah, Wisconsin is a much more to the mean example of Iowa. They're kind of in that same mold, but they're much more balanced, much more capable offensively in the passing game from year to year, but have not been, as of late, as consistent on defense as Iowa. Here are experienced quarterbacks with power for playing time. Jaden Rashada not coming. Here's one for you. You'll love this one. Jeff Sims. Yeah, you don't want him.
I think I saw he's taking a visit somewhere, isn't he, this weekend?
Arizona State.
Okay.
And yeah, he is not Kirk's kind of player. No. Loose with a football and runs around.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then other than that, like your guy Cooper Legas,
Lagasse, Mark. Lagasse.
Lagasse.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't watch that game against
Yeah.
Utah State.
Yeah, I tell you, if they just trade with Utah State, that won't bode very well, I don't think. Cooper Lagasse was okay last year at Utah State, but I mean, were his numbers? What did he do last year? I'm guessing his completion percentage was well below 60. Let me look it up. I don't want to speak out of turn here. Somebody brought him up the other day, but I don't think people are beating down his door.
Cooper Lagasse last year, 64.8%.
Okay.
1,815 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 picks.
I stand corrected. Those are pretty good numbers.
Yeah.
Albeit against the Mountain West. Played 9 games, so I'm guessing he got hurt. Also ran for 122 yards, which is impressive, and has ran for 411 yards in his career, and that's pretty darn good in college.
He put it up 48 times against Iowa in that game.
Yeah, I don't know why they threw the ball so much.
They only lost by 10, right? 24-14? That comes to mind, that score.
I think that's right. Yeah. It was not a blowout. If anybody was at that, I was at that game. It was not a blowout.
But this is Iowa's defense for you. He went 32 of 48. Nothing wrong with that. 213 yards. They're tackling everything after a 5-yard gain.
Yeah, and he was a little bit, let me look at his, a little bit up and down. I mean, he was, let's see, I mean, he really didn't turn the ball over very much. He never threw more than 2 picks in a game. Now, 48 attempts is obviously on the high end of everything he did. Had 40 attempts against Fresno State. Almost everything else was down in the teens as far as pass attempts. He did have a game against Colorado State where he threw 29 times, threw 33 times against Nevada, and then everything else was less. So I don't know. I haven't studied his film. I mean, I was mildly impressed with him at Iowa. He's a little small, I think, but I mean, I don't think McNamara is much taller. I think Lagasse, I saw there, is listed at 6'1". McNamara is probably no bigger than 6'2". Linez is no bigger than 6'1", 6'2". You don't have to be a big guy. Just like this kid they have, I know someone mentioned it in the chat, this kid they've got coming in from the FCS level. I believe he's scheduled to, I think he's visiting right now, I think. This little 5'8", I said little, I apologize to him. 5'8" receiver though, Mark. And actually, you know what? That excites me because of something that Don Patterson has said to me in the past, and actually a number of times on the air, that sometimes coaches make too big of a deal out of how tall a guy is as a receiver. And you look at some of the more electric guys in the league. The one example people like to use, and rightfully so, is Tyreek Hill. If you're explosive, good speed can account for, lack of size, lack of height. And they just got rid of, he left Jacob Bostic, who was 6'4", big receiver. They've got Dayton Howard, who's a big receiver. Jarrett Bowie's like 6'2", 6'3". Now, who will emerge at the X position? Who knows? Caleb Brown's not the biggest. Seth Anderson's, 6 foot, 6'1". Caden Weegen's not the biggest either. This kid, though, that they're bringing in on Tuesday, I believe he's 5'8". Raylan Sharp from Missouri State. He initially was at Houston. Now, the only thing when I saw his profile, the only thing that left me a little bit concerned, let me pull this up here for people who are curious. And again, I've not went through and looked at tape for Raylan Sharp, but his size doesn't concern me. All right. His size does not concern me. What concerns me a little bit, and I'm sure that Kirk looks at this as well, is that out of high school, he had a couple decent offers. Actually, an offer from Arizona, got an offer from SMU, actually originally committed to SMU. About 6 or 7 months later, he decommits, ends up at Houston. Then he enters the transfer portal again, goes to Missouri State. And according to this timeline on 247, he entered the portal back in November, withdrew from the portal, and it's now back in the portal again. So a little bit indecisive there, and that probably throws some red flags up, but they are getting him to campus. I think he's got a couple other places he wants to go. Maybe they could get him to commit on the spot. That'd be great. But I don't think they're going to be able to. Cade Board is the offensive lineman that committed on Saturday after the practice. He's coming in as a preferred walk-on. My guess is they're not going to be able to get this kid as a preferred walk-on. So I got to give him a scholarship. But you know what? Again, hopefully I would assume most of the recruiting momentum and direction that they're heading right now is from Tim Lester. And that should at least give fans something to put their trust in. It's no longer led by Brian Ferentz and Kelton Copeland, these skill position players. Maybe, I'm sure John Budmeier's involved, but I'm guessing that Tim Lester is the heavy voice behind the scenes.
Well, I do think that your hope is legitimate, that things are different and will be different under Tim Lester. I think that he has enough credibility and a track record to show maybe he can evaluate quarterbacks better, develop them better, plan out the offense, scheme the offense, do all those things that are required of an offensive coordinator to succeed in what is arguably the best conference in college football. Timmy McClain is a backup quarterback at UCF, and I'm pretty up on the transfer portal only because we've been doing these updates every day at 3:00 Eastern time. So I'm just running through these names and looking these guys over. And he's basically been the backup quarterback the last 2 years under UCF. Gus Malzahn, John Rice Plumlee, the starter there at UCF. And he threw for about 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 3 picks last year. Mid 60%, 65% range. He would be the other guy with experience. Other than that, like Jacoby Criswell was supposed to be an outstanding quarterback around the time that Sam Howell was the guy at North Carolina, never broke into the starting lineup there. Of course, Travis May at North Carolina. Then he went to Arkansas, didn't get the job. He's in the portal. And there was somebody else who caught my eye, but again, another inexperienced quarterback.
And just so people are aware, Raylan Sharp, I think he had about 1,000 yards receiving last year. So he was productive, FCS level. But we know Iowa, that hasn't changed thus far. For the most part, they're going to attack the FCS and G5. So like the idea that they would even contact Jalen Rashada is slim and none, I think. Now, they went after Caleb Brown and got him. That was a unique situation.